Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Tuesday, July 21st, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside today, we are looking at a high of 94.7 degrees and a low of 70.5 degrees. It is going to be quite a hot day out there, so please remember to stay cool and hydrated as you move through your routine. On the program today, we will take a look at the reasoning behind Governor Newsom's push for a strict return-to-office mandate for state workers. Plus, we're diving into the factors contributing to the recent improvement in reading scores for students across California. We also have a variety of other headlines on the docket for you today. You will not want to miss it. All this and more coming up on Alex's News, so stay tuned. Good morning, everyone. California's return-to-office fight is heating up, and it's putting Governor Gavin Newsom in an unexpected spotlight. Our reporter Ethan has been following this story. Ethan, good morning. What's actually happening here?
Good morning, Grace. So as of today, July 21st, Governor Gavin Newsom has a strict return-to-office mandate in full effect for California state workers. According to reporting from CalMatters, LAist, and Ground News, it comes from an executive order he signed back in March of last year. The rule officially kicked in on July 1st, so we're just about 3 weeks into it now, and it requires state employees to report to the office at least 4 days a week.
4 days a week is a lot. How many workers are we talking about?
It's a big chunk of the workforce. The California State Human Resources Department says roughly 108,000 of the state's 245,900 employees are affected. Now, some roles are excluded because they were already on site 5 days a week anyway. That includes law enforcement, firefighting, custodial staff, and prison employees. So this really targets the office and hybrid workers who got used to logging in from home.
Are there any ways out of it for people who can't easily commute?
There are, actually, and that's an important detail. The mandate allows case-by-case exemptions for employees whose work happens outside the office anyway, like telehealth providers and inspectors. There's also an exemption if you live 50 miles or more from your assigned work site. And to soften the blow a bit, the state is offering reimbursement for public transportation commuting costs. So it's not a blanket order with zero flexibility, but the default expectation is clear.
So what's the governor's argument for pushing this so hard?
Newsom's been leaning on the idea that being in person is just better for the work. He argues in-person work fosters collaboration, boosts accountability, and builds a sense of community. He's also framed it as an economic lift, saying it helps small businesses that depend on foot traffic from state workers. So it's part workplace culture, part downtown revival. That's the pitch he's making publicly.
Does the math actually back up that decision, though?
That's where it gets complicated for him. CalMatters and LAist report that Newsom moved ahead with this order despite a state audit that came to a very different conclusion. That audit found telework could save California as much as $225 million every year. So critics are pointing out he's overriding his own state's financial analysis. When you're a state watching its budget closely, that's a number that's hard to ignore.
I imagine the unions aren't thrilled. What's their response been?
No, they're furious, Grace. The loudest voice is SEIU Local 1000, which represents 96,000 employees. Their argument is basically the flip side of everything Newsom's saying. They contend remote work reduces traffic and emissions, and it saves money for both taxpayers and employees, all without sacrificing productivity. And back in May, the union filed an unfair labor practices complaint with the California Public Employment Relations Board. So this isn't just grumbling, it's a formal legal fight.
Are they trying to change the law itself, or just fight this one order?
Both, really. Beyond that complaint, the union is backing legislative efforts to rein in this kind of mandate. There's a proposal in the state Senate, and there's also Assembly Bill 1729. The goal there is to limit agency authority by requiring written justification for why a specific role actually has to be in person. So instead of a broad order covering everyone, agencies would have to make the case job by job. That would fundamentally change how these decisions get made.
What are workers themselves saying about all this?
There's a real sense of whiplash among employees. Darcy McLeod of the Professional Engineers in California government put it pretty bluntly. The frustration is that workers who were highly efficient during the pandemic are now essentially being told their remote performance was, quote, not good enough, end quote. Think about that. These are people who kept the state running from their kitchen tables, and now they feel like that's being dismissed. That emotional piece is driving a lot of the anger.
Have they taken this fight public at all?
They have, and in a very visible way. The Sacramento Bee reported on a union-sponsored billboard about how return-to-office rules hit working parents. It went up on westbound Interstate 80 in West Sacramento, so a lot of commuters are literally driving past the message every day. It's a smart move, honestly. They're taking the argument out of the negotiating room and putting it right in front of the public and lawmakers.
You mentioned lawmakers. Is there a bigger political angle here?
Definitely, and it's getting pointed. Will Swaim of the California Policy Center went so far as to call this struggle a, quote, foundational challenge to democracy, end quote. He's citing CalMatters data showing SEIU 1000 has donated at least $2 million to current members of the legislature. His argument is that the union is using that money to shape policy in its own favor. So critics see a labor group with real financial muscle, influencing the very people who'd vote on these bills.
And how does that cut for Newsom politically?
It's tricky for him, and that's the fascinating part. Democratic consultant Steve Maviglio pointed out that for a politician like Newsom, who may have presidential ambitions, appearing anti-labor could be, quote, political malpractice, end quote. Labor unions are a core part of the Democratic base, so Newsom is in this odd spot where a workplace policy could ripple all the way to a national campaign. He's picking a fight with allies he may badly need later.
Now you told me this makes for a surprising comparison with other states. What did you find?
This is the twist that really stands out. Reporting from LAist and CalMatters shows Newsom's approach is actually stricter than many other states, including Texas. And the Texas story is remarkable. Governor Greg Abbott initially banned remote work for state employees back in 2025, and that came after President Donald Trump called for federal employees to return to the office. So it started as a hardline Republican move.
Wait, so what happened in Texas after that ban?
Abbott reversed it after only 3 months, and the reason is telling. A multi-agency survey found that telework did not curb productivity, and it actually helped reduce employee turnover, so the data essentially talked him out of it. That's why analysts are now saying Newsom has been, quote, tougher, end quote, on his unions than the Republican governor of Texas. For a Democratic governor, that's a striking headline.
How does California stack up against other states beyond Texas?
It's a real mix across the country. On the stricter end, Republican-led Nevada and Democratic-led New Mexico both require state employees in the office 5 days a week. So California isn't the most extreme. On the more flexible side, Utah only requires employees in the office twice a week. That's a huge contrast with California's 4-day rule.
And what about the states still leaning into remote work?
Quite a few are. Several blue states continue to embrace remote work in some capacity, including New York, Oregon, Massachusetts, Illinois, Hawaii, Colorado, and Washington. So there's no single partisan pattern here. You've got Republican and Democratic states on both ends of the spectrum. That's part of why Newsom's tough stance is drawing so much attention. It doesn't fit the story people expect.
So where does this all go from here?
The next moves are really in 2 arenas. There's the legal track, with that unfair labor practices complaint sitting before the California Public Employment Relations Board. And there's the legislative track, with Assembly Bill 1729 and that Senate proposal that could limit how agencies impose these mandates. Meanwhile, the 4-day rule is the daily reality for those 108,000 workers right now. So the pressure builds while the policy's already in force. It's going to be a defining labor fight to watch.
Really fascinating stuff, and a story that clearly isn't over. Ethan, thanks so much for breaking it all down for us this morning.
My pleasure, Grace. Happy to be here.
Welcome back. This morning, we're looking at a big shift in how California teaches kids to read, and the results are starting to show. Our education reporter, Chloe, has been digging into this. Chloe, good morning. What's the headline here?
Good morning, Grace. The headline is that California's student reading scores are climbing, slowly but steadily. According to reporting from CalMatters, the Associated Press, and the Bakersfield Californian, the state has poured billions into overhauling literacy instruction. It's moved toward what experts call a nuts and bolts approach. But there's a catch, and we'll get to that.
Billions of dollars is a lot. Where did this whole effort begin?
It really goes back to 2013, and the numbers then were rough. California ranked 47th nationally for fourth grade reading on the National Assessment of Educational Progress. Only 27% of students scored proficient or advanced. That was a wake-up call, and the following year the state released a new English language arts framework built around vocabulary, phonics, and structured literacy methods.
So phonics is central. Is every school required to teach that way now?
Not quite yet, and this surprises a lot of people. Most schools have been gradually adopting these methods, but phonics-based instruction isn't mandatory yet. It's scheduled to become mandatory next year, so in 2027. In the meantime, the state's made a lot of systemic changes to prepare, including new curriculum materials, a dyslexia screener, and updated teacher credential programs.
What else is part of that groundwork?
They've also expanded transitional kindergarten, which gives younger kids an earlier start. And there are new guidelines specifically for English learners, which matters enormously in a state as diverse as California. All of this is meant to lay a foundation before that mandate kicks in. The idea is that when phonics becomes required, teachers and schools are actually ready for it.
You mentioned a centerpiece of the strategy. What's that?
Literacy coaches. These are typically former classroom teachers with advanced training who mentor other teachers to improve how they teach reading. The money behind this is striking. CalMatters and the Associated Press report $500 million in grants were allocated in 2023, then $215 million last year, and another $350 million in the most recent budget.
And is that spending actually paying off?
The research says yes. Sarah Novikov of the Public Policy Institute of California found that nearly 60% of school districts used grant money to hire literacy coaches, hire reading specialists to work directly with students, or arrange specialized teacher training. Districts that made those investments saw real gains. Students generally scored 6 points higher on state tests within 2 years, and those improvements showed up among English learners too.
Let's put this in a national context. Where does California stand now?
This is the part. One find remarkable. California has climbed from the bottom of the national rankings to around the middle of the pack. Last year, only 13 states scored higher than California, while the rest scored the same or lower. And here's what makes it more notable. National scores were actually falling during the same period that California's were rising, so the state was moving against the tide.
What about the raw numbers on those statewide tests?
On statewide tests, the percentage of fourth graders reading at grade level was 40% in 2014, and it rose to 46% last year. That's clear progress, though it's still below the pre-pandemic peak of nearly 50%. There was a dip when schools switched to remote learning. So they're climbing back, but they haven't fully recovered that lost ground yet.
Why is fourth grade such an important marker?
It's a critical benchmark, and educators talk about this a lot. By fifth grade, students really need to be proficient readers to comprehend subjects like science and history. If they can't read well by then, everything else gets harder. And the long-term stakes are serious. Low literacy is historically linked to higher rates of unemployment and incarceration in adulthood.
I understand there's another state people keep pointing to. Which one?
Mississippi. It's become the model everyone cites. Back in 2013, Mississippi ranked 49th in the country, but by 2024 it had climbed all the way to 9th. That's a dramatic turnaround, and it used a reading framework similar to California's and leaned heavily on literacy coaches, just like California is doing now.
So if the approach was similar, what set Mississippi apart?
Speed. That's the key difference. Mississippi invested heavily in immediate, comprehensive teacher training, essentially all at once. California, by contrast, rolled out its training over several years. So while California is getting to the same place, it's taking a more gradual path, and that timing likely explains why Mississippi's gains came faster and bigger.
Earlier, you hinted at a catch. What's holding California back?
A severe labor shortage, specifically around those literacy coaches. Roughly 42% of districts reported difficulty hiring them. And in rural and remote areas, the problem is acute. Patricia Gunderson, superintendent of the Lassen County Office of Education, noted the region simply lacks the capacity to find credentialed teachers or professionals with advanced specialty degrees. It's hard to fund a role you can't fill.
Does that shortage ripple out into the classroom itself?
It does, and in an unexpected way. Schools have struggled to find substitute teachers to cover classrooms, while permanent teachers go through literacy training. And in Siskiyou County, Superintendent Alan Carver observed something troubling. Some classroom teachers are choosing to become literacy coaches because the role pays more and is less stressful. That actually makes the classroom teacher vacancies worse.
So the solution can sometimes create a new problem. Are there places getting it right?
Absolutely, and one school really stands out. Tracy Elementary, a low-income Spanish-English dual immersion school in Baldwin Park, used state grants to hire a literacy coach named Claudia Barba. Her approach is hands-on. She analyzes data, assesses students, and holds workshops for both parents and teachers. It's a whole community effort, not just something happening inside one classroom.
How does the teaching itself work at a dual immersion school?
Their literacy plan focuses on phonics and vocabulary in both languages. Children learn to read in Spanish first, and then English. As a result, students are generally fluent in both languages by third grade. It's a deliberate sequence, and it seems to build a strong foundation that carries over between the two languages rather than competing with each other.
And what did the results look like at Tracy Elementary?
The turnaround was striking. Within 2 years of hiring the coach, Tracy's reading scores jumped more than 10 percentage points. English learners saw significant increases, and math scores rose too. But the statistic that really jumped out at me was attendance. Chronic absenteeism dropped from 44% after the pandemic to 11% last year. When kids feel successful, they show up.
So where does all of this leave California heading forward?
It leaves the state at an interesting turning point. The investments are clearly working where they're being used, and next year phonics instruction becomes mandatory statewide. The big open question is whether California can solve that coaching shortage, especially in rural areas. Schools like Tracy Elementary show what's possible. The challenge now is spreading that success everywhere, not just in the districts that got there first.
Really fascinating stuff, and a story we'll keep following. Chloe, thank you so much for breaking it all down for us.
My pleasure, Grace. Always glad to talk about what's working in our schools.
Here are some other headlines. Turning our attention to the skies over Russia, it looks like Moscow is having a bit of a flyaway day. Mayor Sergei Sobyanin reports that Ukraine launched more than 400 drones toward the capital between Sunday and Monday. While 85 were intercepted near the city, the aftermath was still a real blast. 10 people were wounded, and residential buildings took a hit. Fire broke out at the Yuzhny Vreza Industrial Park, and reports suggest an oil depot in Podolsk went up in smoke. President Zelensky confirms they were aiming for logistics and oil, and the aggression didn't stop at the city limits. Ukrainian forces also hit 4 dry cargo ships and 2 Shadow Fleet vessels in the Black Sea, really putting the Russian Navy in deep water. Meanwhile, a drone strike on a bus in Shebekino proved fatal, killing 5 people, including 4 women and a boy, and injuring 23 others. Russia fought back by bombarding Kyiv and other cities. A strike in Pavlohrad injured 13 people, including a 13-year-old girl, while fuel tanks in Odessa were also targeted. Moving north, things are getting frosty between the U.S. and Canada. President Donald Trump has decided to put a price on friendship, imposing 50% tariffs on most Canadian goods. Citing discrimination against American dairy, alcohol, and autos, the administration signed 3 proclamations under the 1930 Trade Act. While energy, minerals, fish, and potash are off the hook, other goods are feeling the squeeze. These tariffs kick in 30 days from now. Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canada is ready to talk, noting that this trade war is really costing families a mint. Crossing the globe to the Middle East, the U.S. military is keeping the pressure on, with 10 consecutive nights of strikes on Iran. Iran is firing back, targeting U.S. assets in Kuwait and Bahrain. The human cost is climbing, with 3 U.S. service members dead, 2 in Jordan and 1 in Iraq, and nearly 100 others injured this month. The tension is spilling into the sea, too, where the Revolutionary Guard claimed an attack on a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz, leaving the crew to abandon ship after 2 other maritime attacks on Monday. Back home, members of Congress are feeling left in the dark, as Representative Jim Himes and Representative Adam Smith say they have not received meaningful briefings on the conflict in weeks. Finally, we have 2 quick updates. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is requesting a massive funding boost of $350 billion. And in the entertainment world, a judge has put the brakes on the Paramount and Warner merger, halting the deal for at least 2 weeks. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.8, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.